And one thing I found, obviously I recruit a lot of management consultants, and more they've been interested in the startup world. And we've had a lot of startups coming to us for that top tier talent, or, you know, from the big four. But often I find that consultants come from quite a structured environment where there's excellent processes, or good processes, I should say. And they really underestimate the ambiguity that can come from working in a startup. I mean, have you observed the same thing when you've been working with startups?
Oh, yes, yes, definitely. Look, I think, you know, people, I mean, this has happened in a lot of the startups I've worked with. We often have people wanting to come in from corporate world or really big roles. And there's a couple of things. One, I find often they're quite good at the strategy and the framework and all of that. It's just that they just don't have the operational experience generally, and that's where I've had some issues around that. Also, I think the more senior you get in organisations, the less hands-on typically, not for me because I'm still very hands-on, but typically you are in these sorts of organisations, that's the whole reason you move up. You know, you move up and up, so you get, you know, you have a team that is doing a lot of the work under you, and that's the way that this whole organisation, these big four, are structured. And so you do often get away from just being hands-on, and they just don't. I think people forget what hands-on really is, and, you know, the hours you need to work, and also I think it's really, you know, I suppose the question is, I mean, well, I'll go this way actually. In startups, you know, you have to be adaptable. That's the key. It is I think, one of the number one, you know, there's a whole lot of work being done around adaptability quotient, so AQ, it's the new IQ or EQ. And it is something, they say it's the only Q that you can actually work on and increase in yourself. But I think that when you're in big corporates where people are typically less risk averse, all that, it doesn't actually push people to be that adaptable. And so it might just be a muscle you haven't used for a long time, but imagine someone who's worked in a corporate or a big four for 20 years going into a startup where you're hands-on, the direction's changing all the time, there are no systems, typically not a lot of systems in place, and the whole thing around is iteration. That's what, you know, this sort of, the best startups we see really have this sort of closed loop, which allows them to constantly iterate and iterate. And I think that's really something we haven't seen done really well in big corporates yet.
AQ, I love that. I'm gonna have to
have a look. Yeah, it's really, really interesting actually. And there's you know, a friend of mine, actually, I'll send it to you later, but she, Penny Casco, she actually does you can go and take a survey and find out your AQ and how you can, so it's really interesting space actually.